Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. First question. I know you've covered no-gainers pretty extensively, but what about a no-gainer who puts on a lot of weight just from overeating? Would they never adjust to carrying the extra weight? And he went on to state that what he meant was that don't they get used to carrying their own body weight? Don't they get stronger from being fatter and carrying that extra weight around? All right, good question. And to answer that question, no, they won't get stronger. It's going to become more and more difficult for that person to walk around and move the heavier they get, because you have to understand moving around a heavy body is the same as you trying to walk around with a heavy backpack on or with a big heavy loaded vest. You adapt to exercise. The no gainer does not. So if they add 100 pounds of body weight of fat to themselves, it's going to be the same as if you right now, with no conditioning to it, were to try to walk around with an extra 100-pound weighted vest on. That's how it's going to feel to them, and it's always going to feel that way to them. It's not going to get easier. And so again, people aren't understanding the no gainer is really screwed in a lot of ways. The no gainer really can't afford to be obese. I mean, you talk about a segment of the population that can't afford to be obese. You have a segment of the population that don't get all the health benefits of exercise to offset the negatives of gaining fat, and they don't get stronger to help carry their extra body weight around. They don't get conditioned to it. So yes, if a no gainer gains a bunch of fat, they are really and truly fucked on every level. It's not an option for them. They have to really manage what they eat. And again, it sucks, but that's why I've said before, no gainers tend to avoid physical endeavors oftentimes, and that's why you see them go into other things, and a lot of them end up being really nerdy people who are very successful at some cerebral activities. All right, next question. I seem to have a lot more strength on the overhead press when I use a narrow grip, similar to the one you advise on the closed grip bench press. Is there a reason for this, and should I continue to overhead press with such a grip? Yeah, and I actually advocate a fairly narrow grip for most people overhead pressing, and the reason for it, you're going to be stronger and you're going to push the weight through a longer range of motion. That's overall a fantastic combination, because on a lot of exercises, having to move the weight through a longer range of motion means reducing the weight. On the overhead press, many people are stronger, and the reason is it puts your shoulder joints at a better anatomical position so that it puts less stress on them, and the brunt of the longer range of motion allows you to get more tricep in it. The actual movement itself, doing it narrower, lets you recruit the triceps heavier in your overhead pressing, and accordingly, with that extra range of motion you're adding in, the triceps take the brunt of that extra work. And now some people would say something like, well, I don't want to put my triceps into a big pressing movement, because I'm trying to work the primary movers. Well, the thing is, your upper chest and your delts are getting worked heavily on any overhead press, full range of motion. So that shouldn't be a concern for you. But the benefit is that it is going to make your triceps bigger and stronger. And the same people, it's really funny, who would focus upon taking their triceps out of a movement like that are the same people who seem to feel the need to do 10 to 15 sets of tricep isolation movements every week. It's really funny, because in a lot of ways they're shooting themselves in the foot. They're making themselves be forced to do extra tricep work, when if they did these big heavy compounds certain ways and through the full range of motion, their triceps would be tremendously developed. Because you think about it, really, closed grip bench press, overhead pressing, weighted dips, all done correctly, can develop absolutely enormous and powerful triceps, while at the same time improving your delts and your chest. But guys don't want to think about it that way, and so they want to end up isolating everything without realizing that the more they can get a lot of other muscles involved, particularly powerhouses like the triceps, involved into any of the pressing, is not going to detract from the development of the other muscles. It's just going to add to the development of your triceps, and it's going to add to your overall strength. Because in this case, you're not only recruiting more tricep, you're moving the weight through a longer range of motion. That's just good for all around strength and development. A nice narrow grip, full range of motion overhead press, whether it's a push press or even a strict press, is a fantastic overall full body exercise that just happens to give you really big shoulders on top of it. And that's a good way to look at it. All right, next question. I have a fucked up shoulder. What is the safest chest exercise I can do? It doesn't have to be isolating or primary mover. I've been out of the game since my injury 2 months ago. I couldn't even do arms because of that shit. So yeah, any advice would be great. All right, safest chest exercises for your shoulders, or anything that allow you to tuck the elbows fully at the bottom. What I'm going to recommend is, whether it's flat, decline, or incline, doing a narrow grip bench press, Again, about shoulder width, so a closed grip bench press, and bringing the weight lower down on your chest so that your elbows are fully tucked at the bottom. Alternatively, if you have access to narrow dipping bars, right, fairly narrow ones, not ones that make you go out wide. Some of those V ones go out really wide. Any exercise that lets you have your palms facing each other for the chest, like again, dips like that done with a narrow grip, or dumbbells. You could do dumbbells either turned into a 45 or a full 90-degree turn in. That's something I noticed that Big J does, and I talked to him about that in person when we had met before. As someone who has had a lot of shoulder issues, he's had major shoulder injuries, that has actually helped him continue to train his chest in spite of those, of doing his dumbbell presses with his palms actually facing each other and doing them really low down on the chest. That puts the least stress possible on your shoulder joints. So look into doing those. All right, next question. Jason, how much does mental strength come into weightlifting? It seems since my compound lifts have become heavy, I feel anxious / nervous that the weight is too much before the lift, and relief and sense of achievement once completed. It seems as though my physical strength outweighs what my mind thinks I can achieve in the gym. How much of a part of weightlifting does the mind play? As far as training numbers go, honestly, it's not that big of a deal, because if you can even keep your level of arousal low and just hit training maxes, meaning fairly calm training maxes that are just the most you can do without psyching yourself up and maintaining good form, you're going to get a lot stronger. Now, when it comes to hitting true maxes, or what we call competition maxes, and a lot of guys choose to do those in the gym, but I don't recommend you hit competition maxes outside of competition. Your mental psych up, your attitude is tremendously critical. It could literally mean the difference between lifting 5 or 10% more weight in some cases. That's why a lot of guys use the ammonia salts, because it clears their head. It gives them focus. A lot of guys choose to jam to certain music. They have a meditation routine they do. They have self-talks that they give themselves. Their coaches psych them up psychologically and give them pep talks oftentimes right before they attempt like a third attempt in a powerlifting meet, or even like a big Olympic lifting event. So there's a lot to the psychological component to maximum power, but it really shouldn't affect your day-to-day training at the gym much, because with minimal psyching and just walking in calm and no real thought to your attitude, it's actually possible to develop tremendous strength and still lift very heavy weights. And there can be something to be said for actually reducing your level of psych up if you want to train at a higher frequency, meaning if you're only doing a lift 2 or 3 times a week, you can get a little more psyched up. But guys like the Bulgarian style training, I believe Matt Perryman talked about that a lot, that actually keeping yourself calm and not talking yourself up and getting yourself psychologically aroused or jamming to music can actually help prevent your peripheral nervous system from becoming as fatigued, and it will let you hit maxes, training maxes at least, at a higher frequency, meaning as often as every day, and in some cases multiple times a day, without burning out. So it actually, believe it or not psyching yourself up can actually be a very valuable training tool to get stronger. But when it comes to actually truly lifting a maximum weight, your psychology, your thought process, what you're telling yourself in your head can be massively important, and it can affect your lifts on a very real level. It can literally mean the difference sometimes between adding 50, 70, or 100 pounds to a lift in some cases, as crazy as that sounds. All right, next question. Can one separate the strength and hypertrophy portion of a workout in one day, i.g. 3x3 squats in the AM and then come back at evening and do hypertrophy leg work? Thanks. You could, but I wouldn't recommend it. If you go back and listen to the videos I've done in the last day or two talking about not mixing rep ranges in the same workout, essentially you're still doing the same thing, because most of your adaptation's happening over the next 24 hours, and in some cases up to 48 hours. You are interfering with that. And if you remember what I said about balancing the recovery methods for the different things, you are coming in and you're still having the peripheral nervous system fatigue from the 3x3 when you're coming in and doing the higher volume work. You are going to reduce how frequently you can train again. And I would recommend that if you're wanting to train at such a high frequency on the squat, that you're wanting to train it twice in a day, you might want to consider going to some sort of Bulgarian style training, because you clearly are wanting to train the squat at an ultra high frequency. And honestly, if you're wanting to train at that level of frequency, you need to drop what you're calling hypertrophy workout, which is really metabolic fatigue work, because it's really just incompatible with very, very high frequencies of training on something like the barbell squat. You're absolutely going to burn yourself out. very quickly trying to do what you're talking about doing. If you're going to train, again, twice a day means that you're ready to go to, some people do it and they'll only do that 2 or 3 times a week. But you're going to get better results if you just go to squatting once a day, every day if you do that. And if you do that, you really need to stay under 5 reps entirely. And you need to be avoiding any sort of high rep leg work in between as well, other than just list cardio. All right, next question. Law of accommodation. Should you switch up exercises every few weeks? Bullshit or not? If you're thinking you need to switch up exercises every few weeks, no, that's bullshit. That's not understanding the law of accommodation. The law of accommodation means that after 3 weeks of the same training stimulus, you stop adapting to it. So what that means is that after 3 weeks, you need to be adding weight to the bar, or you need to be changing your rep ranges. And that's why most classic block periodization models run 3-week blocks, meaning every 3 weeks you end up changing the rep range and the intensity, or you dramatically change the volume. And the reason for that is that you're adapting to what you're doing after 3 weeks. And so, and again, that only applies to slightly more advanced lifters who are out of their noob game. Someone with at least 6 months of continual training experience. It's because noobs, they don't have to worry about the law of accommodation. They just grow no matter what. They can just keep adding weight. As long as they're eating and sleeping enough, they can just keep adding weight to the bar over and over and over for months. But yeah, once you get through those noob gains, you basically probably need to change something every 3 weeks, but it doesn't need to be the exercises. You could actually just make sure that you change your workloads. Meaning if you've been doing, squats with a given weight, you need to add weight to the bar after 3 weeks, even if it means you lose a couple of reps and you go to a different rep range. That's what you have to do to get through the law of accommodation. It's the little things like that that matter. Or you could even reduce the weight slightly and go to higher reps. But the thing is, you're going to need to change the workload in some way if you want to continue to adapt. And that's what most classical models of periodization are built around. All right, next question. You talk often about human evolution, the development of cooking food, and its effect on the growth of the brain. How important to human evolution was the domestication of dogs? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. While this is slightly off topic, I love this question because it still fits in with a lot of the series of videos I've done talking about human development over time. Dogs actually are really interesting as far as our evolution goes and as far as even our food and everything goes, because dogs, and by dogs I mean modern domesticated breeds of dogs, evolved right next to us. Because what we did, we learned thousands and thousands of years ago, we took wolves and we domesticated them because they offered a lot to us. And actually dogs' diets tend to match ours very well, and the reason they do so well on people food in general. And yes, the healthiest dogs are not fed dog food, they're fed healthy foods that you're eating, meaning things like rice, vegetables, steamed meat, stuff like that. Your dogs will actually oftentimes live to be over 20 years on that. There are veterinarians who've noted that. That's actually better for your dogs than even the best dog foods. Most dogs die of cancer due to their diets and the foods we give them. But they developed to eat our foods next to us, and they were intrinsic to kind of a lot of our development as a species, because dogs weren't just companions and pets. All the original dogs, we used them to hunt with, and we used them as watchdogs in the night, meaning no stranger from another tribe could sneak into the camp, steal your food, steal your children, steal your women, and run back out with them if you had dogs, because the dogs would alert you. The dogs would often attack them. The dogs would, at the very least, start barking. Like dogs were an intrinsic part of our evolution as individual tribes at the smaller level, and the fact that they helped us obtain food due to their tracking skills. So basically the dog's sense of smell and their sense of hearing compared to ours actually tremendously affected us on a lot of levels. And they were a very, very critical part of early tribal life, and that's the reason you see dogs from all over the world. I mean, we have famous breeds of dogs that we have that recognized even by the Kennel Club and stuff that have come from everywhere. I mean, all the way down into Africa, all up certain breeds through Europe, all the way through Asia, far into Asia, all the way over there. Dogs have just always been a big part of human history as far as we know. We've had dogs for all this time, for everything from guard dogs, watch dogs, to hunting dogs. And it wasn't until later that people bred certain companion breeds. But yeah, the dog's sense of smell and hearing allowed us to obtain a lot of foods easier for hunting. And again, they helped guard the camp at night. And so dogs have been very, very loved for thousands of years. And that's one reason that people really do tend to, love dogs so much is that it's just because of our history with them. They helped us so much early on during tribal days. And interestingly enough, what's been noted, the most research we've seen on dogs has actually shown that dogs actually love you more than you love your own children. Like, that's something that has been studied based upon their hormonal response and the oxytocin that they make. Because dogs are such an intrinsic part of our early life, we bred them to love us more. And they genuinely and truly love their owners and masters. Dogs, they accept you usually as the alpha of their pack most of the time because they're very pack-oriented animals. But they produce something like 3 times the oxytocin when their owner touches them than when a human being touches a person they're in love with. So actually, your dog actually loves you more than the person that you're in love with, at least on the chemical level, which is interesting. And that explains their loyalty so much. There's a reason they're loyal, and it's hormonal in nature, because they actually deeply love the other members of their pack. Their family, they love you on a deeper level than humans are actually capable of loving, which is really interesting. That actually explains their loyalty on a biochemistry level. So yeah, they're an intrinsic part of human history. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.